Hello, welcome back to the channel. Now today I'm making a video that I was asked to make by a commenter on one of my previous videos. So GodAtom, I'm not sure how you like it pronounced. This one's for you. And GodAtom asked me if I could do a little video tutorial on how to set up P3d Multichannel. And that's what I'm doing here. So Multichannel, if you're not aware what it is a way of spreading your simulator's load across multiple PCs. Basically you use additional machines to generate outside views. You've been able to do this with a piece of software called WideView since the days of, I think, FS 2004, FS9, maybe even before that. And cockpit builders have been using it for years to sort of spread the load and make it possible to get these big wide 180, 220 degree display systems without the drag on frame rates that you would get trying to have multiple windows open on a single PC. And all it does really is it connects multiple instances of the simulator together over a network, and they synchronize their data so they're all flying in the same place, and then you generate the various outside views that you need. You have as many PCs as you need to generate the number of views that you want, and each of them get the full resource of the PC to render that view, so your frame rates are a lot higher than they would be otherwise. So if you're building a multi-display simulator, multi-channel is something you're going to want to look at. And because I have my 180 degree wide view, I needed to go multi-channel because there was just no way that one PC would sustain generating those views and all of the other software that I need to make the simulator go, of which there's quite a lot. I did originally at one point have a 3-channel system. You might remember that from my Immersive Calibration Pro video I had. One machine controlling the left half of my display, one the right half of my display, and then the one host machine running all the rest of the software. And that was great, and I got decent frame rates out of it, but unfortunately the synchronization left something to be desired, and I would get tearing in the middle. And because the views joined in the middle and not off to either side, which they would do in a 3-projector system, it was very obvious. I couldn't ignore it. I think if it had been a 3-projector system, I wouldn't have been that bothered, because you don't spend a lot of time looking left and right, you spend most of your time looking dead forward, and so the amount of tearing would have been minimal. P3d's multi-channel mechanism has been in the product since version 3.2, I think, or possibly 3.3. It was briefly in the product in version 1, version 1.3 again, I think, but they took it out fairly quickly as it wasn't working very well, and I think there were lots of reasons for that. It's basically a hack of the existing multiplayer system, so it was built on top of that, and you'll see that when I show you how you set it up, because it's basically much the same as how you set up multiplayer, except that each of the computers, instead of having its own aircraft, is sharing your aircraft and sharing your cockpit. P3d native multi-channel has a lot of advantages going for it. It's built into the product. It understands all of the internal APIs. It can synchronize a lot more stuff a lot more easily than WideView, which is the alternative method of doing it. WideView, on the other hand, has been around for a long time. It's well understood. It's simple. It does what it says on the tin, and it's pretty reliable. So in terms of comparing and contrasting one against the other, which I'll do here, I'm coming down on the WideView side, but it suits my use case a little bit better, and I'll explain why as we go. But anyway, the purpose of this video is to show you how to set up multi-channel with P3d, and so let's get on with that. So once again, I have my 2 sim machines now via VNC. So this is sim 2, which is the client machine that's connected to the projectors. You can see both desktops via VNC, so it's a double wide display. And VNC will show you all the monitors that you have connected to your machine, unlike Remote Desktop, which shows you just the one. There are actually 5 monitors connected to this machine, but I've scaled down the window so that we're only looking at the one that we care about, which is the main host PC display that I actually use to run the simulator interface on, and is my control center, which is number 5 over here. But you can see I do have 5 displays across 2 video cards, by the way. You can't have 5 displays on one video card, at least not with NVIDIA. You might be able to with AMD, but I still don't think so. I needed 2 for that. That in itself slows things down a little bit, rendering displays across 2 video cards. Although if they are, as they are, matched video cards, it seems to be a bit better. Now, Something it's worth being aware of is that the P3D multi-channel feature was originally designed for use with high-end graphics cards, basically NVIDIA Quadro cards or equivalents that have something called hardware genlock. And hardware genlock is basically it's like a network for graphics cards. You connect the graphics cards together and they send each other signals to say when they're rendering their frames. The idea is that you can get them all rendering exactly at the same time and avoid any image tearing. And multi-channel was built with that in mind, the idea being that all the clients have to render their frame at the same time, and they can only render their frame once the host has already rendered the frame. So the host talks to the clients and says, okay, you can go now, and then they render the frame and say, okay, we've rendered the frame, and then the host is allowing them to move on to the next frame. Excuse me. What this means in practice, and it's important to note this, is that your simulator will only run at the rate that the slowest PC in the simulation can stand. So if you've got one PC that for whatever reason is only capable of doing 15 FPS in the current situation, and you have another one that could comfortably do 25, it will only run at 15 FPS or thereabouts because of the synchronization, and you can't turn it off. There is a setting that looks like you can, but you can't. And this is a fundamental limit, I think, of P3D multi-channel for me, that you can't turn off this synchronization, because it means that when things get complicated, when frame rates drop low on the host PC in particular, on this PC, and even with low graphics settings and everything else on this machine, in very complicated scenery, you are going to get relatively low frame rates. Once they drop below a certain level, then the frame rate on the clients, it's going to halve. So if I fix the clients at 30 FPS, let's say, I need this to run as close as I can to 60 FPS. When it drops too low, then the clients will go from 30 FPS, they'll halve straight away to 15 FPS. So those are disadvantages you should be aware of. They don't necessarily make it a non-starter, but they do potentially mean that you'll have performance issues depending on your particular configuration. And one other thing, and I'm just going to go and hunt down some files here, but one other thing you should be aware of is that multi-channel is a feature of the prepared Professional Plus edition. It's not a feature of the normal Professional or Academic edition. So if you are licensing at that level, you won't have access to multi-channel. If you want multi-channel, you need Professional Plus. The retail price for that is pretty high. I think it's about $2,000. And that's a big investment. Now, I actually get mine on a developer subscription because I'm developing add-ons. And so it's perfectly legitimate for me to license it that way. It means I'm paying monthly, basically. I think I'm paying $20 a month for my Pro Plus subscription. Over time, over 100 months, I will end up paying the same as I would do for a license cost. So, you have to decide if that's the right model for you, but it's certainly cheaper up front. Okay, so in order to set up multi-channel, you need to create and populate a couple of files. I'll show you where those are. So the first one is this one, host.cfg, and this is found in the root of your prepared folder. So here, program files, Lockheed Martin, prepared v4, host.cfg, and it looks like this. It's just a straightforward text file. You have to have all of these entries. Most of them don't look relevant, and that's because, again, it's derived from the multiplayer system. So things like, MaxPlayers, ReservedForFriends, it's irrelevant. I don't think multi-channel actually cares what settings you have there, but you definitely have to have them or else it won't work. And I will actually, I'll post this default text into the video description, so you can just cut and paste it into your own rather than trying to copy it down from here. It's also on the Lockheed Martin SDK documentation website, if you know where to look for it, but it's obscure enough that I think I'd rather give it to you now. The only thing you need really to set in this file is this value here, LanUsername, should be set to the name or IP address of this computer, which in this case is sim0. You can also tweak this number, enable FrameSyncRate. Remember I talked about how they try to synchronize their frame rendering. This is the number of times a second that it will attempt to do that. 20 is the default. I've tried higher, I've tried lower. Higher seems to give me worse performance. Lower than 20, well certainly lower than 15, gives me worse performance. So I've just left it at 20. You can experiment with the rate and see if it helps you, but it certainly hasn't for me. Enable frame sync, you think, oh, I can turn that to 0 and get the frame syncing off. Well, no. If you do that, multi-channel just doesn't work. So, sorry. You have to have it, and it has to be turned on. And that's all you need for host.config. Then on the client machine over here, similar situation. Again, in the root of your simulator, you need a config file. This time it's named after the name of the machine. So this machine is called sim2, so it's sim2.cfg. Actually, you can give it whatever name you like. I'll show you where the name is relevant later, but by default, it's given the name of the machine. So that's what I do. And it looks like this. It's not dissimilar to the last one, has less values in it. Again, you need all of these values. 3 things you've got to set on this one. LanUsername, that's the name of this machine, so sim2. AutoStartHostId, that's the name of the host computer, sim0 in this case. AutoStartJoinAircraft, also sim0. Again, this is stuff that's come from Multichannel. These are the 3 values you have to set. Everything else you can leave. Enable FrameSync, don't change it, because again it will just stop multi-channel from working if you do. Now once you have those 2 files configured, that's all you need to actually get started. Then you need to know how to invoke P3d in a multi-channel mode, which is actually pretty straightforward. So let me just get this out of the way for a minute. You see I have shortcuts for wide view and multi-channel. So if we look at multi-channel, I'll just copy the target value here, bring up Notepad, post it in. So this is the command line that you need to use. So path to prepared.exe as usual, but then /multichannel tells it to start multi-channel, and then the path to the host.cfg file. Now, of course, this is where you could call it something else. You could call it wibble.cfg for all I care, but host.cfg is the default. And that's what you should use. Do specify the full path. You could just try going host.cfg and thinking, well, it knows it's in the root, so it should just work, but it doesn't. So make sure you specify the whole path. Also, don't do what I keep doing and using a space instead of a colon after multi-channel. It is multi-channel colon, no spaces, and then a value. So that starts P3d in multi-channel mode, and on the other computer it's the same. Prepar3d prepared.exe/multichannel, and then the path to, in that case, the sim2.config or whatever else you've chosen to call it. No, I don't want to save that, thank you. Alright, so let's click on that. Not much different to the usual startup. Takes a little while because I'm loading quite a few add-ons. So I'll just skip forward. Okay, here we are at the scenario screen. I'm just going to pick the default scenario for now, that'll do. So there's the first difference. Building object lists, you don't normally see that. It takes a couple of seconds. I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's something to do with working out what information it has to synchronize between the host and the clients. Then you get into the standard loading terrain data as you would get with a normal flight in non-multi-channel mode. And here we are in the default scenario that should be very recognizable to any prepared user, and everything looks pretty normal. But we are in multi-channel mode. Now we don't have the client started yet, and I'm not going to do that yet because I need to show you now how to set up the view groups and the actual multi-channel setup. And all of that can be done inside the user interface from, on the views menu, view group management. Now you may have played with this before in non-multi-channel mode, but in multi-channel mode there's some extra bells and whistles. So this is the view group management window, and from here you can do most of what you need to do. So the first thing you need to do is to set up your actual multi-channel config. Now I've got mine in here already, but actually I'm just going to remove this so that we can do it from scratch. Okay, so if you had this empty, which you would do, you'd say, okay, I'm going to add a new one. Gets the default name, you go into it, give it a name, and I'll call that dual channel. Okay, that's fine. Now it needs to know which machines are taking part in the simulation. So we've got two, machine 1, machine 2. Machine 1 is going to be this one. By the way, sorry the display is very slow. Type VNC is normally pretty quick, but I have 5 monitors on this machine and it's sending all 5 displays at the same time, and that's slowing it down quite a bit, so it's not really this slow in real life. So this will be machine ID number 1, and then in fact we'll give it a proper name, which is sim0, which is this machine. No, I said sim0, not sim parenthesis. And then machine 2, which we'll give machine ID number 2, unsurprisingly, is sim2. The reason it's sim2 and not sim1 is because there used to be a sim1 when I had a 3-channel system, but now I've only got 2. Okay, so that tells it what we've got in terms of multi-channel. That information will get saved in a file called multichannel.xml in the program groups folder, sorry, program data folder. If you don't know about program data, and it's a folder that's normally hidden, so you've got to show hidden files to see it, but it's in the root of any Windows 10 machine, and it's used to store application data that is not supposed to be user specific but is global. And what it used to get stored in a shared user folder under users, but they actually get stored in program data now. And so in program data you'll find a Lockheed Martin folder and a prepared v4 folder, and inside that there's a bunch of config files which are set at the global level, and in particular multichannel.xml will have the details that you've just configured here. So you can edit it by hand if you need to, but it's actually a little bit easier to do it in the UI. Having done the multi-channel setup, you then need to tell it what displays you have. Now by default it will create a configuration for you, and it will enumerate all the displays that you have on the machine. So you see there are 5 here because there are 5 displays on this machine. Well, the only one we really care about is the current screen, but I don't know which one it is, which is slightly awkward. So if you remove these, by the way, even if they're superfluous, under many circumstances Prepared will just put them straight back again. So I will leave them there and I will ignore them. But you need to add your remote displays as well. So in this case the remote displays are the ones that are on the other machine, which are the projectors. In order to do that you need to know a couple of pieces of information. So the first thing is the machine ID. Well, we know sim2 is machine ID 2 because we just did that. So, and we'll rename it from configuration 1 to dual. In fact, let's not call it that, let's call it 180 degree display, which is what it is. Although apparently I can't type properly. Display. There you go. So we need to add 2 entries for the projectors. By default those are going as 6 and 7. Right, so on the details page here you need to fill in the machine ID, which is number 2. Give it a name. This will be left projector. Still can't type. Left projector. So you need to know, you need to give it a display ID. Now, there's not a problem with having display ID 1 on machine ID 2, except there kind of sometimes is. So really your display ID should be unique. So what I recommend doing, let the machine generate as many as it wants locally between 1 and whatever, and start at 10. So let's say display ID 10, because you won't get that automatically generated. And then you need to know which port it is on your display adapter. So I happen to know the left projector is adapter index number 1, but you may need to experiment. And it's easy to experiment because once you've got things set up, you can hit the preview button and things will actually work. So we go to display 7 here, which we're going to call right projector. That's on machine ID number 2, and it must therefore be on adapter index number 2, which I believe it is. And we'll give that display ID 11. No, I said 11. And that's all we need to do for now. We will need to actually deal with the view group in a minute, but first let's actually spin up P3D on the client computer. So P3D v4 multi-channel. Again, it's a pretty normal startup. You can see it's starting the wide view windows there because I've still got the wide view plugins enabled, but because they're not running on the host, it doesn't matter. At this point it says trying to find simulation for AutoStart, so now it's looking for the machine you told it for, which was Sim0. It's found Sim0, it's loaded the list of aircraft that Sim0 has, and now it also waited to see if there were any other clients it needed to communicate with, and there aren't. Now it's loading the terrain, etc, etc. Now how does it know where to go, you ask yourself? Well, the short answer is that the host machine has told it where it is, what aircraft it's using, etc. It's already synchronized that information, so it should just start up by default in the default scenario. Now don't worry at this point that that's just a black screen. Nothing's gone wrong yet. So you can see we've been told that a client has joined with a LAN username not included in multichannel.xml. Well, that's because we hadn't actually saved it yet. So was there? Okay, that saves it. And now we get the picture on the other machine. So that was just something to be aware of. If you haven't actually hit OK on the dialog, it hasn't saved to the actual files and things won't work. So let's reopen it. It's painful. I'd really like there to be an apply button, but there isn't. So now we know that the group's working. So they've both got the same view, and that's fine. But already the view is synchronized. So if we switch to the outside view, let's say to the spot plane, changes here, doesn't change there. So that's not synchronized, right? Well, there's a reason for that. It's because we don't have a view group set up. View groups is the way that you control the displays across all of the machines in the simulation, because you want to be able to manipulate them all at the same time. So that's where we need to go here. Now by default there will be an autofill desktop group that's already been defined. You can ignore that or delete it, suit yourself. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to give this view group a name, which I'm going to call dual projectors. I'm going to say allow zoom yes for now, and I don't really have time in this video to explain to you exactly how view groups work, I'll be honest. It would take probably about another hour, so you really need to go and look this up yourself. But basically view groups can be defined as either a portion of the overall display, sort of, you know, starts here, finishes there, a viewport in other words, or it can be defined with an entirely custom view frustum. And a view frustum is it's basically a defined point in space with a view in a particular direction at a particular angle. I talked a bit more about view frustums in my Immersive Calibration Pro video, and in fact, as you will know if you saw that video, one of the outputs from the calibration software is a viewgroups.xml file containing all of the information necessary to generate those views, and you can use what's in those files to create the view group here, because this is all going into the viewgroups.xml file that you will find in the program data file. But for now I'm just going to leave things as they are. In fact, what I'm going to do, because we want a left and a right view, is I'm going to say the side angle of this view group is minus 90, because we want to be able to look 90 degrees left. The right angle is plus 90, and then because we're 32 by 9, we need to know, I think it's roughly 25 and minus 25 to begin with. This may give us, it might be slightly distorted, it doesn't really matter that much. And then we need to add two views, the left and right view. Now again, you can define this with a separate view frustum, in which case you need to remove the information that I just put one level up, or you can just say what portion of that viewport that you defined it actually occupies, and you do that by using a value between 0 and 1. So if we say this is the left viewport, which stretches from 0 to 0.5, which is halfway across, but on the top it's from 1, which is the top, to 0, which is the bottom. That's that viewport. And then on view 2, in fact view 1, let's just say left. Give it a name of left. View 2, we'll give a name of right. And this starts at 0.5 and goes all the way to 1. And then the top is 1, the bottom is 0 again. So that's to find a viewport that's split into 2 halves, left and right. And at this point we can hit preview. Okay, so it gives me an error. More than one view was mapped to the same display ID. So that's the bit we're missing. We need to map them to a particular display. So remember, the left projector was display ID 10 and the right projector was display ID 11. Try that. See what it does. Well, it doesn't seem to do an awful lot. Okay, well let's say OK. Now there's a reason why it doesn't do an awful lot, which is that we don't actually have that display group, view group selected. So you have to go into the view groups menu here and we'll change it to dual projectors. And then, as if by magic, you will see those 2 views have suddenly popped up on the client computer. Now this is not really a valid view. It doesn't give you a proper 180-degree view. If I'm actually looking at my my curved screen now, and it looks pretty unnatural. Obviously you need the data that comes from Immersive Calibration Pro to make that work, but you can imagine if you had 2 LCD panels set at roughly 45 degrees to each, that would give you something approximating 180-degree view. But that is how you set up the view groups. And then the view groups, once they're switched in, they will follow each other. So go back to the host for a minute, and you notice that the host has adapted to try and squeeze the 180 degrees of the viewport onto the screen. You can get around that by setting an additional view in the viewport called main, which maps to this module. So you notice that the client machine tracks the view that you selected on the host machine. See, so I put it into the virtual cockpit and it moved into the virtual cockpit. If I switch it to the cockpit view, it moves to a straight cockpit view, so on and so forth. If I switch, however, to virtual cockpit only, then this switches to the virtual cockpit view, which is useful to know later on. But the view groups follow each other. Like I say, I don't really have time to teach you how to use view groups in this video, but you need to have them set up in order to make the multi-channel display work. And what you need to remember is that whatever you've got defined on the host will overwrite what's on the clients. So if you try and customize the clients, then you're going to lose that data from what's on the host. So make sure they're always kept in sync. And so at this point, we've basically got a working multi-channel system, kinda, sorta, in that everything that happens on the host is synchronized. So back on the desktop computer, I'll just pause the simulation, but you can see things are nicely synchronized. And that's basically all you have to do to get multi-channel set up. So just create the config files on each machine, then go into the UI, set up the multi-channel data to select what machines are participating in the simulation, set up the display data on the host PC. And don't forget that has to include all the displays that you want to run, including the ones on the other machines. You may need to do a bit of experimenting to work out which display IDs are which. You can use the preview function for that, and then once you've got that where you want it, you can play about with the different views and try and get views set up that you like. And if you're going the whole hog and trying to do something with, say, Immersive Calibration Pro, I refer you to my previous video where it tells you how to set it up, and then you just cut and paste the data from the view group files that Immersive Calibration Pro creates for you, paste that into the viewgroups.xml for your simulator on the host, and you're good. So that is P3d Multichannel in a nutshell. Now, in terms of pros and cons for that, pros, the synchronization is really good. So clearly, because it's working from inside the simulator and it's built by Lockheed Martin, it knows how to keep things properly synchronized. So your different control panels will have the same state, and any control that you operate on the host will tend to operate on the client PC. And don't forget that most multi-channel use cases wouldn't actually have the virtual cockpit showing like this. They would be in cockpit mode, which you can do with multi-channel. You can have a different view on the host than you have on the client PCs, but it's slightly complicated demonstrating that because of the way I've got the view group set up, but you can do it. And if you have, if you're doing what I'm doing and you want to have all the systems on the client machine also running the way that they are on the host, so that the aircraft behaves correctly, either because you want to show the virtual cockpit with all the right information on the instruments, or because you need to show outside views and you want to make sure that things like the flaps and stuff operate the way they're supposed to, multi-channel does that for you. So it does hook things up very nicely. Disadvantages: performance is the main one. So this is fine because we're using a relatively undemanding aircraft in a relatively undemanding scenery area with graphical settings set very low on the host. I've turned, I think, the scenery down to very sparse, so it's hardly generating anything at all to get the frame rate as high as I could. And on the client, I've got fairly normal graphic settings. I'm not pushing it, trying to go sliders right. And again, I'm maintaining a relatively high frame rate. As long as you're doing that, and the frame rates are high and they're synchronizing, then everything is good. But once frame rates start to drop, particularly on the host, that's when you get problems, and you'll get visual tearing, and the frame rate on your client will will go sort of 30, 15, 30, 15, 15, 15, 30, 15, 15, and things will be choppy and jumpy. And I found that the more complex the scenery, the more complex the airports, the more complex the planes, the worse it gets. At one point, I think I was in the Avro RJ at Edinburgh Airport in one particular place with about 5 or 6 panels undocked, and every undocked panel also reduces your frame rate. And my host frame rate was dropping down to like 8 FPS. So as you can imagine, my client frame rate was not much better. So would I recommend multi-channel, P3d multi-channel for a multi-channel simulator? Yes, absolutely. If your use case suits it, and if you are willing to deal with the disadvantages, and if you can get the performance that you need, absolutely go with it. It's the best synchronized multi-channel system you are going to find. You couldn't do any better than that because it's built in. It is expensive, especially if you're not licensing it the way I am via a subscription, but actually flat out, because it's going to be a significant dollar investment. On the other hand, no matter how many machines you add to the simulation, you'll only pay the one flat price. So it's not like some systems where every single machine needs a license. Of course, when you run in the multi-channel mode, you need to be aware, for example, that you may need to buy multiple licenses to the aircraft or to the scenery that you're using, because their EULAs may specify that they're only allowed to be installed on one PC. So please don't break the software rules. It does mean things get a bit more expensive, but they weren't built with multi-channel in mind. The licenses weren't set up like that, and if they say you need 4 copies to run on 4 machines, then that's what you should do. Hopefully that's been useful if you were looking at P3d multi-channel and didn't really know where to start. So if you like the video, then I guess please hit the like button. It does help. And if you want to see more content when it comes, and I know it's dribbling out very slowly at the moment, but it is going to get faster, trust me, then hit the subscribe button, and I guess you need the little bell icon as well to actually get an alert when I post something, or else just check that when you want to. If not, well, feel free to hit the dislike button, or leave me a sarky comment. I don't mind. This is all just done for fun to help the community, and hopefully I've done that with this video. So God Atom, let me know if this has given you the information that you need, and check back on the channel soon for some actual flight video, which I'm hoping to post in the next couple of days. So thanks for watching, and see you again soon.